The snowfields of the Bavarian Alps stretched endlessly, a frozen sea of silence broken only by the distant thrum of helicopter rotors. In a small cabin perched above the cliffs of Oberammergau, Anja Keller woke gasping, sweat clinging to her skin despite the bitter cold. For 3 years the same dream haunted her: Damascus, the shot, and the fallout that had destroyed everything. She sat upright, reaching instinctively for the rifle propped against the wall. The Barrett M82A1 was more than a weapon. It was a remnant of a past life. Anja, 29, had once been the pride of the Bundeswehr's elite Fernspeer unit, a sniper of unparalleled skill, respected and feared. But a single operation had ended it all. One bullet in the Middle East, and her world had collapsed. Betrayed by the very system she had sworn to serve, she had retreated into self-imposed exile in the mountains, living with ghosts and guilt. Her auburn hair clung to her forehead as she stood by the window, staring at the swirling snow outside. She wasn't alone. From the trees below, a figure approached with the slow, deliberate steps of someone who belonged here. Arthur Brandt, retired Fallschirmjäger, emerged with a quiet grunt, leaning on a walking stick he didn't truly need. At 68, his weathered face bore the marks of decades spent in the most brutal theaters of war. Their bond was unspoken, forged in shared understanding and silence. He never asked about Damascus, and she never inquired about his limp or the shrapnel scars that flared with the weather. "Coffee's still warm," she said as he reached the porch. He nodded. "Saw the helicopters, 2 NH-90s, moving northeast. Low altitude, not a drill." Anja poured steaming black coffee into chipped mugs. They drank in silence, the weight of unspoken thoughts settling between them like the snow on the branches. "You ever miss it?" Artur asked eventually, nodding toward the rifle. Anja's eyes didn't leave the mountains. "I miss the clarity, knowing who the enemy was, knowing who had your back. What I don't miss is the politics, the lies." He studied her quietly. "You're not living, Anja. You're waiting. For what? A knock at the door? Vindication that never comes?" Before she could respond, the satellite phone rang inside. Only 3 people had the number. She picked it up. "Keller? Anja, it's Colonel Westerman." The voice carried urgency. "We have a situation. A KSK unit is trapped in the Karwendel range. Ambush. 50 hostiles, heavy weapons. We can't extract until dawn. We need a sniper with mountain warfare experience. You know that terrain. We need you." Anja's hand tightened on the receiver. "I'm not military anymore. I know. But they're going to die without help. We have no one else in range. Please." As she lowered the phone, Artur was already watching her. "Well?" he asked. "They're trapped. Same as I was once." "And what are you going to do about it?" Anja turned to the rifle. It caught the dawn light just so. Her voice was steady. "I'm going to make sure they don't die because of someone else's mistake." Anja moved through the cabin with the precision of an old habit reawakened. Every movement was economical, deliberate. She opened the weapons locker hidden beneath the floorboards, retrieving gear she hadn't touched in 3 years. Ceramic plates for the tactical vest, night vision optics, rangefinder, climbing gear, emergency rations. Her fingers moved without hesitation. Artur watched from the doorway, silent, arms crossed. "Still fits?" he asked as she strapped on the vest. "Like it never left," she replied without looking up. She opened a weathered map of the Karwendel range, her fingers tracing the paths she had memorized long ago. The KSK unit was pinned in an abandoned forestry station nestled between 2 ridgelines, a tactical coffin if the enemy held the high ground. She'd hiked every trail in that region during her years in hiding. It was familiar, cruel terrain. She knew exactly where she needed to be. The northern ridge, she observed. It has the best angle and the clearest view. It's the perfect spot to place the sensor, even in this weather. "You're going alone?" Artur asked, his tone showing his concern. "It's a solo task. You'll monitor the data feed and relay updates to the team leader. I'll check in every hour. If you don't hear from me after 2 hours, just activate the backup plan." Artur nodded. "I'll get the secondary shelter ready. The one in the cove above Hokkyoch. It's well protected. You can use it if you run into any challenges." She slung the survey kit over her shoulder, its weight familiar and reassuring. Outside, the storm had intensified, with visibility dropping significantly. The conditions were challenging, but the cloud cover would help shield her sensitive equipment from interference. As she stepped out into the snow, Artur handed her a weatherproof pouch. "Some supplies, including hand warmers and your favorite chocolate. Take them. You'll be glad to have them out there." She gave him a small smile. "You always think of everything." He smirked. "Takes one to know one." The hike to her overwatch position would take 4 hours in this weather, assuming no complications. She started down the trail, boots crunching in fresh powder, breath visible in the bitter air. Every sense was alert: the hum of wind through the trees, the shifting of snow beneath hidden branches. The old instincts returned, each step shedding the layers of civilian life like old skin. 3 years ago, Anja Keller had been condemned in a closed military tribunal, sacrificed to protect senior officials from the fallout of a botched operation. Her shot had been perfect, center mass at 1,700 meters. But the target turned out to be an informant, a man who was supposed to be protected, not eliminated. No warning, no explanation, just silence and disgrace. Now, another group of soldiers, strangers, faced the same fate, sacrificed by politics, left to die in silence. And something in her refused to let it happen again. As the last light of afternoon faded behind the ridgeline, Anja reached the first waypoint. She crouched beneath a cluster of pines, checked her bearings, then continued west. The snow deepened. Her pace slowed, but her resolve did not. Tomorrow, when the sun rose over the Karwendel, it would rise on a battlefield. But this time, she would not be the ghost who watched from exile. She would be the shadow in the storm, the shot they never saw coming. She was no longer waiting. She was hunting. Darkness settled like a weight across the Karwendel Mountains. The wind howled through the trees with a voice of its own, ancient and unforgiving. Anja climbed the final stretch toward the northern ridge, the path narrowing to little more than a ledge etched into the cliffside. Every step required precision. One slip, and she'd vanish into the ravine below. By the time she reached her chosen perch, a stone outcrop nicknamed Adlerblick by local climbers, the snowfall had intensified. She dug out a small space in the snow, laid down her insulated mat, and began setting up the Barrett. Every click of the bipod legs, every adjustment of the scope was performed with ritualistic care. The forestry station sat nestled 1,200 meters below, barely visible through the storm. But Anja didn't need to see it yet. She just needed to be ready. She checked her timepiece, 0147. The KSK unit would be deep in their defenses by now, running low on ammunition, counting minutes and lives. Her earpiece crackled faintly. "Keller, this is Control. Update. Position secured, visual on target zone limited, but confirmed grid coordinates. Ready for engagement at first light." "Understood. Sit rep from ground team. 4 wounded, 1 critical. 12 operators remain combat effective. They're holding, but just barely. Enemy force estimated at 40. Organized, well supplied, possibly foreign contractors." "Copy. Any known Overwatch elements?" "Affirmative. At least 2 sniper positions confirmed on Southern Ridge. Unidentified caliber, not amateurs. Anya's jaw tightened. Professional shooters. That changed things. She ended the transmission and leaned back against the frozen stone, pulling her thermal blanket tight. She couldn't sleep, not really. She just needed to rest her muscles, let her mind run the math. Wind speed, temperature drift, target range, bullet drop. The snow kept falling. Somewhere below, men she'd never met were staring into the dark, listening to the soft ticking of death in the form of radio silence and dwindling ammunition. The military might forget its own, but operators never forgot each other. Around 0410, faint movement caught her eye through the scope. Infrared signatures shimmered. 8, maybe 10 figures, moving low and slow across the western slope, clearly probing for weak points in the KSK's defense. She smiled grimly. Too exposed, too close. She adjusted her scope, steadying her breath. Wind, 14 km/h from the southwest. Range, 1,117 meters. Elevation, -34 degrees. She selected the lead figure, likely the team leader, by the way he checked each man's spacing. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger. Breath in, pause, breath out. A thunderclap tore through the storm. The enemy team leader dropped, his head vanishing in a puff of pink mist. The others scattered, returning fire in wild arcs, but they had no idea where the shot had come from. In the valley, chaos erupted. She reloaded. Another shot, another target down, then a third clean through the chest. Now they were panicking, retreating in the dark, dragging wounded. The KSK team used the distraction to shift their positions, fortify their line. Every second she bought them was another breath, another heartbeat they hadn't expected to get. Keller, this is Control. We confirm impacts. SEAL team reporting less incoming fire. You've changed the game. Stay sharp. I'm not going anywhere, she muttered, eyes locked on the scope. She had just declared war. And this time, they'd see her coming. The storm intensified as dawn crept across the ridgelines, painting the Carwendel in hues of steel blue and muted white. Snow whipped sideways, biting into exposed skin like needles. Anya adjusted her position slightly, her limbs aching from hours of immobility, her eyes never straying from the scope. Below, the battlefield had transformed. Flares cast flickering shadows against the trees, and distant bursts of gunfire rolled like distant thunder. She counted at least 3 active engagements. The primary perimeter breach near the forestry station, a feint from the eastern slope, and an encircling maneuver she'd anticipated an hour ago. She had already taken 5 shots that night, each one lethal, each one shifting the tempo of the fight. But the enemy was adapting. They were no longer charging blindly into her kill zone. They were moving smarter now, smaller teams, better cover, rotating their radio frequencies. These weren't just mercenaries. They were professionals. Her earpiece crackled again. Keller, this is Westermann. Do you copy? Loud and clear. We've intercepted comms. Multiple enemy units are searching for a long-range shooter. They know you're out there. 1 team may be approaching your sector. 3 operators, northeast slope. ETA, 10 minutes, maybe less. Anya remained calm. Copy. Repositioning. She began packing her equipment with practice speed. The specialized gear was disassembled first, its parts secured in their protective case. Then came the lenses, sensors, and measurement tools. Within 90 seconds, she had departed from the viewpoint, leaving only a faint impression in the snow. She moved along the ridgeline, using natural rock formations for shelter from the wind. Her destination was a secondary site she'd marked years ago, a jagged crag with a better vantage point. From there, she could observe the entire northern basin. The climb was challenging. The path was steep and icy. Twice her footing slipped, but she quickly regained her balance with expert skill. Her grip was strong and steady. It always had been. By the time she reached Krehensan, her breathing was controlled again. She set up silently. The Barrett rested against the stone like a familiar old friend. She didn't need calibration. She trusted her hands, her instincts, her training. Through the scope, she watched the firefight escalate. The KSK team had begun withdrawing to their fallback point, a cluster of reinforced cabins partially buried beneath a snowbank. Wounded were being carried. One man collapsed mid-run. 2 others dragged him to cover, shouting without sound in the storm. Then she saw them. 3 enemy figures, dark clothing, low profile, moving fast along the slope she had just vacated. One carried a suppressed marksman rifle. Another had a drone controller. Recon team. They were close. Too close. She adjusted her scope. First shot, through the thigh of the drone operator. He dropped screaming. Second, through the scope of the marksman's rifle, blinding him permanently. The third turned to run. She hesitated. He was young, maybe 20. Scared. She let him go. Seconds later, her radio came alive again. Visual confirmed. That's your position, Keller. They're hunting you. I know. Air support ETA 90 minutes. Can you hold? She looked through the scope again. Snow swirling. Enemies advancing. I can hold. Her breath misted into the cold morning air. For 3 years, Anya had waited to matter again. Now every heartbeat was purpose. Every shot, redemption. She was no longer the ghost of Damascus. She was the shield in the mountains. The wind screamed across the jagged ridgeline as if the mountain itself were warning her. Anya dug in, the cold biting into her gloves, but she didn't flinch. Below, the forest around the old forestry station had turned into a war zone. She watched it unfold through her scope, flashes of muzzle fire, figures moving between trees, chaos with structure beneath it. She recognized the tactics: suppression from the east, feint from the south, while the main force flanked from the north. Someone down there had studied German Special Forces doctrine. This wasn't a random ambush. It was a plan, a trap. And someone had built it with her old playbook. Her earpiece clicked. Keller, be advised. High-value enemy element suspected in the area, possibly ex-military. Call sign, Spinna. Confirmed past with foreign recon units. Foreign? GSG-9, KSK, possibly French or Polish Special Forces too. This is not local militia. Anja's jaw clenched. She knew that name. Spinna, the Spider. A code name used in rumors among German operators. A ghost like her, but one who had turned. Sold his skills to the highest bidder. She zoomed in through the scope. Near a fuel shed at the edge of the station, a man in matte black gear directed movements with hand signals. Calm, efficient, no wasted motion. He checked his watch, then pointed directly toward the eastern cabin where the wounded had been moved. Anya breathed slowly. This had to be him. Range, 1,429 meters. Wind, steady, 11 km/h southwest. She compensated, exhaled, let the world narrow to the crosshairs. She squeezed. The shot echoed like distant thunder. Through her scope she saw the man stumble, clutching his shoulder. Not fatal, but the message was sent. He looked up, directly toward her ridgeline. He knew. She reloaded quickly and moved 5 meters to the left, settling behind a second rock outcrop. Seconds later, 3 shots cracked through the air. One struck where she had just been. The Spider had brought his own sniper. Her earpiece clicked again. Artur's voice now. They know where you are. Movement detected on your flank. 2 teams converging. 10 minutes out. Understood. Time to leave. Anya packed the rifle, fingers fast despite the cold. Every second counted now. She had bought the KSK unit time. Now she had to survive to give them more. She moved along the ridgeline with low, fast steps, keeping beneath the skyline. Snow disguised her footprints, but she knew it wouldn't slow the right trackers. She had to reach her fallback position, Wolfskopf, a narrow ledge above a frozen waterfall where only one route led in. As she descended through thick pine, she caught movement behind her. Fast, low, professional. "Artur," she whispered, breathless. "They're close. Too close." "I see them. I've got one in sight. Want a distraction?" "No, I'll handle it." She reached a rock shelf and ducked beneath it, drew her sidearm and waited. Footsteps. Heavy boots. A breath. A whisper in Russian. She fired twice. A scream, then silence. The other two retreated. She didn't chase. She ran. By the time she reached Wolfskopf, the first rays of morning sun pierced the clouds, lighting the valley below. The forest still burned. The KSK team was still alive. And Anja Keller was still fighting. She settled behind the stone, set up the Barrett again, and whispered, "Let's finish this." From her new perch at Wolfskopf, Anja scanned the battlefield below. The ridge offered a commanding view of the valley, but it also made her a beacon for anyone skilled enough to look. She adjusted her scope and swept the tree line, slower this time, more deliberate. She was no longer the only hunter. Radio chatter whispered in her ear. Colonel Westermann's voice, clipped and urgent. "Keller, report. We've lost contact with 2 KSK fire teams. Visibility is down across the valley. Any intel from your side?" Anja replied quietly, still observing. "One high-value target wounded. Their sniper knows I'm here. They've got teams tracking me." "Professionals." "Understood. We're rerouting air support. Estimated arrival in 60 minutes. Can you hold?" "I can hold," she answered, though her muscles ached, and her hands had begun to tremble from the cold and fatigue. Through the scope she spotted the wounded Spinne again. He had retreated behind an overturned truck, now bandaged, but still giving orders. His men were regrouping, pushing back. The KSK perimeter was starting to collapse. And then, movement. A squad of 5, low and fast, breaking away from the forest's edge, heading toward the cabins where the wounded were sheltered. Not a feint this time, a final push. Anja adjusted. They moved in pairs, bounding formation, professional spacing. Suppressing fire from the tree line covered them. First shot, rear gunner. Through the helmet, dropped instantly. Second shot, team lead, hit in the hip, crumpled mid-stride. The others dove for cover, returning blind fire toward her position. Then came the counter. A crack, high velocity. The enemy sniper had relocated. The bullet impacted the rock inches from her scope. She ducked, heart pounding. "Artur," she whispered, "I'm compromised. Sniper is active, moving with a spotter. Likely southern slope, 1,400 meters. I'm scanning," came his reply. "Hold position. Don't engage until we have eyes." But Anja knew she couldn't wait. The attackers were closing in on the wounded. She adjusted her angle, crawling to the far end of the ledge to get a better line of sight. The wind was screaming now. Visibility dropped again. Snow fell in thick waves. She blinked rapidly. Her vision blurred. Fatigue. She blinked again, forced focus. Through the scope, she found the remaining attackers now just 30 meters from the cabins. No time for elegance. She exhaled, aimed, and fired 3 shots in rapid succession, all 3 connected. 3 bodies fell into the snow. Silence. The KSK comms flared to life. "Sniper! Friendly! They've cleared the approach! We're stable!" Anja allowed herself one breath of relief, but her body screamed in protest. Her left hand had gone numb. She'd lost all feeling in her trigger finger. Then a sudden pain bloomed across her left side, hot, sharp. She'd been hit. A grazing wound just beneath the ribs. She rolled backward into cover, clutching her side. Blood soaked her shirt, but it wasn't deep. Not fatal, but it would slow her. "Keller, report!" Artur's voice cracked over the comm. "Hit. I'm okay. Repositioning." And she meant it. They had wounded her, but not stopped her. Because Anja Keller didn't stop. Not until the mission was complete. The cold clawed at her wound like a living thing, but Anja Keller gritted her teeth and kept moving. The blood loss was manageable, for now. She had pressed a clotting patch against the gash beneath her ribs and wrapped it tight with gauze from her field kit. Pain sharpened her senses. She welcomed it. Behind her, the echoes of gunfire continued to roll through the mountains, but the tempo had changed. The enemy advance was slowing. Her shots had disrupted their momentum. The defenders were reorganizing. That window wouldn't last. She needed to shift again. Her current position at Wolfskopf was compromised. The sniper who had tagged her knew the general area. It wouldn't be long before a drone or another shooter zeroed in. Anja packed up the Barrett with shaking hands. She moved east along a narrow game trail, boots crunching softly in the snow, every step a whisper. She needed to reach a spot called Totenrast, a natural overlook above a frozen creek bed. Difficult terrain, but it offered a 180-degree sight line and a rear escape route. She'd discovered it during one of her aimless treks in exile. Now it might save her life. Halfway there, her radio buzzed. It was Westerman again. Keller, update. We've picked up signals from an encrypted enemy channel. They're using German military protocols. Someone in their command structure is ex-KSK, possibly one of ours who went rogue. She paused mid-step, the wind cutting across her cheek. Name? She asked. Peter Lockman. Call sign Eiswolf. Former recon, disappeared 3 years ago after a disciplinary inquiry. No court-martial, just vanished. Anja exhaled slowly. I trained with him. He wasn't just good. He was dangerous, but quiet, always watching. Something was broken in him. Then you know how serious this is. He's likely directing the sniper teams and flanking units. If you get a shot, I won't miss. By the time she reached Totenrast, her breath came in ragged pulls. The slope was steep and ice-slick, and she had nearly fallen twice. But the pain in her side kept her awake, focused. She unrolled her mat, set up the Barrett, and scanned the valley. The battlefield had shifted. The enemy now held the southern ridge in force. But they weren't pushing. They were waiting for something. And then she saw it, a column of figures moving through the forest, carrying something heavy. She adjusted her scope. Missile tubes, not RPGs, larger, manpads, surface-to-air. They were preparing for the extraction helicopters. She keyed the mic. Control, this is Keller. Do not send air support. Repeat, do not send air support. They've deployed shoulder-fired SAMs. SA-24s or equivalent, at least 2 units. Copy. Confirming with AWACS now. Stand by. She shifted again, swept the tree line, and spotted one of the launcher teams settling into position near a pile of fallen logs. Wind, calm, range 1,522 meters. She slowed her breathing. The man bracing the launcher turned sideways, exposing the silhouette. She fired. The round hit center mass. He folded backward, the tube clattering into the snow. Shouts echoed from the trees. She reloaded. Another figure tried to grab the launcher. She fired again. Miss, too fast. Third shot. Hit. Leg wound. He dropped. Then silence. Keller, this is Control. AWACS confirms your sighting. Air support redirected. You may have just saved 2 helicopters full of medics and wounded. Anja didn't reply. Her side throbbed. Her fingers trembled, but she stayed behind the rifle. The hunt wasn't over, not until Eiswolf showed his face. The storm had eased, but the cold remained brutal. At Totenrast, Anja adjusted the thermal wrap beneath her vest, trying to suppress the tremble in her hands. Her breath came in shallow bursts, every movement reminding her of the wound stitched beneath her ribs. Pain was her companion now, silent, persistent, and oddly comforting. It told her she was still alive. She sipped water from her hydration pack. Each swallow felt like ice. No food, she didn't trust her stomach. Not now. Then her radio crackled. "Keller, this is Artur. I've intercepted something. Short-range burst transmission. Audio only. You need to hear this." A click, then static and a voice. Calm, low, unmistakably German. "Anja, if you're still alive, you're listening. You always were good at surviving, better than the rest of us. But this isn't your fight anymore. Walk away. You've already paid more than most." It was him, Peter Lockman, Eiswolf. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the sound of his voice wash over her like acid. She remembered him from the training fields in Hammelburg, quiet, calculating, obsessive with detail. He'd never had friends, just allies and opportunities. Another transmission followed. "You're not saving anyone. You're delaying the inevitable. Those men down there? They were written off the moment they crossed the line of departure. You know how this works. We were taught the same doctrine." Artur came back on the line. "He's baiting you, trying to break your focus." "I know," she said, but it was working. She scanned the tree line, searching for him. Somewhere down there, he watched her. He knew her style, her timing, her philosophy. He'd trained beside her. He would predict her next move unless she broke the pattern. "Keller, this is Control," Westermann's voice this time. "Intel confirms. Lockman is commanding the southern element. He has a mobile HQ east of the riverbed, behind the 3rd ridgeline. He's coordinating artillery and snipers. If we take him out, the whole operation loses cohesion." Anja nodded to herself. "Coordinate? Sending now. Grid 341192. She entered the coordinates into her scope's rangefinder. A structure, barely visible, half camouflaged among rocks and pine. A modified trailer unit, shielded by thermal netting. Guarded by 2, maybe 3. She adjusted her position. The angle was poor. She needed elevation. There was only one place that gave her a clean line of sight to the eastern ridgeline, a cliff above the frozen creek known as Fels. She keyed her mic. "Moving to Fels. We'll engage once in position." "Negative," came Westermann. "Too exposed. You'll be vulnerable to counter-sniper fire." "I'll be fast," Anja replied. She moved quickly, wincing as each step aggravated her wound. The path to Fels was narrow, covered in ice and wind-blown snow. She didn't care. Her blood was up now. This wasn't just about the mission anymore. It was about the years she'd lost, the betrayal, the lies. And the voice that had haunted her most, now breathing into her ear, daring her to give up. 15 minutes later, she reached the ledge. She unfolded her bipod, lay prone, and locked her body behind the Barrett. The trailer came into view. She saw him. Peter Lockman. Eiswolf. Standing outside the structure, speaking to a spotter. No helmet. Calm as ever, like a man who believed in control. Anja adjusted her scope. Wind, 9 km crosswind. Range, 1,873 meters. She slowed her breath. One shot, for her name, for the truth, for every man still bleeding below. She squeezed. The rifle kicked. The shot echoed. And through the haze she saw Lockman stagger, drop to one knee, then fall face forward. Control was silent for a beat. Then, "Target down." Anja closed her eyes. One more ghost put to rest. Smoke began to rise from the southern ridge as confusion rippled through the enemy ranks. Anja watched through her scope as figures scrambled in disarray. Radios clutched, heads turning like birds without a leader. Peter Lockman had been their spine. With him gone, the vertebrae of their operation cracked. She shifted her focus to the forest edge, where enemy marksmen had taken overwatch positions earlier. They were abandoning them. Some retreated deeper into the trees, others froze, waiting for new orders that would never come. Her earpiece crackled with life. Control to Keller. Confirmed. Command structure is collapsing. We're intercepting fragmented transmissions. They're panicking. Good, Anya said quietly. Then it's time. Below, the KSK unit took advantage of the chaos. A dozen black silhouettes pushed forward from the cabin perimeter, sweeping west with textbook precision. They moved fast, clearing structures, establishing fallback positions for extraction. Anya scanned ahead of them, eliminating threats before the soldiers even saw them. One shooter behind a downed tree, shot through the eye. Another sprinting between two boulders with a light machine gun, hit center mass. The storm had given way to clear skies. The sun cut across the ridge now, gleaming off the melting snow. Visibility improved. Her range expanded, and her wrath sharpened. Keller, Artur's voice came through, serious. One of the thermal drones just picked up movement on your rear slope, fast, probably a 6-man patrol sweeping your flank. How close? 800 meters in closing. They're moving high, trying to get above you. She cursed under her breath. Rabenfels was a perfect shooting position, but a death trap if compromised. Control, she said, keeping her voice steady. Advise KSK they'll be blind for 10 minutes. I'm displacing. Copy. Be careful, Viper. She disassembled the Barrett in practiced movements, each part slipping into its place in the case. Her side throbbed. She pushed through it. Survival was a rhythm. She had found it again. The only way out was down. She descended from Rabenfels using a narrow ravine that split the cliff face. It was steep, slick with melting snow. She controlled her slide with her boots and gloved hands, digging into the rock where she could. Behind her, the echo of approaching boots grew louder. They were close. She stopped at a narrow bend, turned, and drew her pistol. From the ridge above, 2 enemy soldiers appeared. The first had barely spotted her before she fired. 1 round. Headshot. The second dropped into cover and returned fire. She flattened herself against the stone, heart hammering, counting his rhythm. 1, 2... Pause. Pop up. She fired again. He dropped. She kept moving. By the time she reached the bottom of the ravine, the gunfire had moved behind her. The valley echoed with the sounds of a fight slowly turning. Her radio buzzed. SEAL team is inbound, Control said. Extraction ETA 20 minutes. Repeat, 20 minutes. Anja collapsed behind a boulder, pulled out a glucose tab, chewed without tasting it. Her vision blurred briefly, then steadied. Status of the missile teams? Neutralized. Your shots triggered a sweep. Clark's unit finished the rest. We're clear. She smiled faintly. Then Archer again. They'll come for him, you know. Lockman? Yes. His kind always had insurance. Files, triggers, even dead. He's a problem. Then we make sure his death means something. As she moved again toward a final position with a view on the extraction zone, she realized something deep had shifted. For years she had lived only to survive. Now she was fighting again. But this time, not for orders, for purpose. The Alpine Valley had transformed. Where chaos had ruled only hours ago, a fragile order now emerged. Columns of smoke curled into the crisp air, rising from burned equipment and splintered trees. The forest smelled of cordite, pine, and blood, but for the first time there was momentum. The tide had turned. Anya reached a new perch, just above a jagged outcropping called Totenkanta. It gave her full visual access to the clearing where extraction would take place. She unfolded her mat, settled her breathing, and trained her scope on the approach path. She didn't need to shoot now, not unless someone tried to take back what they had lost. Through her earpiece came the voice she had come to trust most in recent hours. Colonel Westermann. Final sweep underway. Clark's team has secured the southern edge. Enemy resistance is down to scattered pockets. We're preparing the extraction zone. Copy, Anya replied. I'll keep overwatch until the last rotor is gone. She spotted movement below, figures emerging from the smoke. The KSK unit, wounded helped by the strong, faces smeared with blood and dirt, but alive. She counted 12, then 2 more. One carried by a stretcher improvised from gear webbing, another limping with a rifle as a crutch, all accounted for. A voice joined the radio traffic, one she hadn't heard before. Keller, this is Captain Julian Bergman. You probably saved all of us. I don't know what they told you about us, but we were dead men, until you showed up. I didn't do it for medals, she said. I did it because no one else would. Still, thank you. You're not forgotten. She stayed silent, but his words hit her harder than expected. They hadn't forgotten her. Not all of them. The roar of rotors cracked through the silence. 2 NH-90 helicopters dipped low over the ridge, weaving between the peaks, powerful and graceful against the morning light. The downwash scattered snow like confetti. One bird touched down, the other circled wide for cover. The team moved quickly, practiced, wounded in first, then support teams. The last aboard was Captain Bergman. He paused at the ramp, scanning the ridges, looking up at her perch, though he couldn't possibly see her. He raised a fist. Anja lifted a single-gloved hand in return. Then the bird lifted. Her earpiece clicked again. Archer. They're clear, both birds heading southwest. Escort confirmed. No hostiles in pursuit. Copy, mission complete. A long pause, then his voice softened. And you? You coming down? Anja looked around. The snow had stopped. The light had changed. She no longer felt the weight of exile. Something had lifted. I'll think about it, Dunn, she said. She stayed there a while longer, watching the mountains, the valley, the scars below. Each one marked by a decision, a bullet, a heartbeat. She had bled for this land, cried in its silence, found purpose in its isolation. And now, perhaps, it was time to return. Not as a soldier, as something else. A shadow in defense of the forgotten. A sentinel for those left behind. When she finally stood, the pain in her side reminded her she was human. But the rifle in her hands reminded her she was not done. Not yet. She turned west toward the ridge, toward whatever came next. The descent was quiet. No gunfire, no voices, only the creaking of the forest thawing under the morning sun. Anya moved slowly, conserving her strength. Every step jarred her wound, but she didn't rush. The danger had passed, for now. She made her way back toward the old hunter's path leading to her temporary shelter, a rock-anchored lean-to she'd built 2 winters ago beneath a thicket of spruce. There she had cached supplies, dry clothes, a burner phone, and medical essentials. Artur met her halfway, emerging from the trees like a specter, his rifle slung low, face smudged with smoke and sweat. "You look like hell," he said flatly. "Feel worse," she replied, managing a faint smile. He offered his arm without a word. She leaned on him for the last 200 meters. Inside the shelter, he handed her a flask. "Warm tea, stronger than regulation allows." She took a long pull. "Tastes like petrol." "Exactly." They sat in silence, the kind that didn't need filling. Finally he spoke. "That last shot. Lockman, you sure it was him?" She nodded. Saw his face through the scope. It was personal. Artur looked away for a moment, then back. "And the others? The ones who set you up?" "Westerman is working on it. The files Lockman left behind. Names, dates, bank transfers. If what she says is true, the Bundestag will have no choice but to reopen the Damascus inquiry." He studied her. "Is that what you want? Your name cleared? Your rank back?" Anya stared at the steam rising from her flask. 3 years ago, I would have said yes without thinking. Now, I'm not sure. The mountain didn't care if I had medals. And the people I saved yesterday didn't ask for my clearance level. They just needed someone who could shoot straight. You did more than shoot, Artur said. You exposed them. You shifted the outcome. That means something. She nodded slowly. Then maybe that's enough. He reached into his pack and pulled out a rugged tablet. Transmission came through 15 minutes ago. You'll want to see this. She watched the screen. A video file. Westermann's voice. Berlin has confirmed. Maxwell, Lockman, and the private military network they controlled are officially designated as hostile actors. The classified evidence you recovered, well, it's not classified anymore. Press briefings start tomorrow. You're not a scapegoat anymore, Anja. You're the reason the truth is being told. Anja exhaled, a long, quiet release of a breath she hadn't known she was holding for years. Artur stood and stretched. There's more. They're assembling a team. Joint command, small unit, extraction, sabotage, deniable missions. Off books. They want you. Anja looked up sharply. I'm not going back to the system that threw me away. They don't want the old Anja Keller. They want the one who stood alone on a ridge in a storm and saved 24 men from dying because someone else screwed up. They want the ghost who didn't disappear. She didn't answer. He handed her a sealed envelope. Think it over. I told them you'd call if you were interested. If not, we vanish again. The mountains will take us back. He walked away into the trees. Anja sat there alone, the envelope in her lap, the wind whispering through the branches like a promise. There was no going back, only forward, and maybe, just maybe, that forward path led somewhere worth following. That night, Anja sat by the fire, her back pressed against a pine trunk, watching the flames dance. The envelope lay unopened beside her. She hadn't decided. Or perhaps she had, and just didn't want to admit it yet. The crackling fire reminded her of the first winter she'd spent in the mountains, alone, broken, driven into exile by politics she hadn't understood. She remembered the silence then, how it had seemed suffocating at first, then strangely comforting. The silence had taught her things. About herself. About purpose. Now, it was different. Now the silence carried echoes of men she'd saved, of enemies she'd defeated, of choices that had consequences. Her satellite phone buzzed once, low-priority signal. She answered, expecting Westermann, but it was someone else. Anja Keller? The voice was male, mid-40s, clipped German with a Saxon undertone. Yes, my name is Oberstleutnant Erich Drexler. I'm assembling a new division under direct NATO Joint Command authority. High-risk, non-traditional operations, no uniforms, no patches, just results. We're calling it Sondergruppe Echo. She didn't speak. I read your file, what's left of it. Your shot at Lockman, it wasn't just vengeance. It was surgical, cold, professional. You saved men who had already written themselves off. Why me? She asked finally. Because we need people who've already been broken by the system, people who understand what it means to be thrown away and still get back up. We can give you the freedom to choose your targets, set your conditions, fight your war. She glanced down at her hand, still calloused from the rifle, still shaking slightly from pain and cold. Who else? Fitzgerald, your old friend. He's in, one of the KSK team leaders too, Bergman, and surprisingly, Peter Lockwood. That name pulled her upright. Lockwood? After the fall of Maxwell's operation, Lockwood flipped, testified. He gave us the final piece of the Damascus file, the one that proved you were set up from the beginning. He's facing sentencing in The Hague, but offered himself in exchange for a support role, strategic intelligence, no field work. He asked for you personally. Anya stood slowly, walking a few steps away from the fire, staring out into the darkness where the forest slept. "Let me guess. You want me to lead?" "No," Drexler said. "I want you to decide. That's the difference. No more orders. Only choices." The line went quiet. "I'll give you 48 hours," he said. "We have a location in Norway. Cold country. Quiet. Clean. First mission's already waiting. When you're ready, send a one-word message. Schotten." She ended the call and turned back to the fire. The envelope was still there. Inside, she found a photo. The KSK unit, post-operation. Arms around each other. Smiling. Bergman flashing a thumbs up. On the back, a note scribbled in pen. "You didn't just save us. You reminded us who we are. JB." She held the photo in her hands a long time. Then she packed up her gear. Rifle, medkit, jacket, sidearm. She cleaned the shelter, doused the fire, and hiked through the night to her cabin one last time. The mountains had taught her to survive. Now she was ready to do more than that. She opened her old field radio, tuned it to the secure channel Drexler had provided, and keyed the mic. Schotten. Then she turned to the door, the rising sun casting gold through the trees, and walked out to meet the new war on her terms. 3 weeks later, Anya stood on a windswept plateau in Norway, the sea crashing against black cliffs in the distance. The compound behind her was minimal, steel and stone, no insignia, no guards in uniform. It could have passed for a decommissioned research station. Inside, it was anything but. She moved down the corridor silently, the same way she had in the field. Low footsteps, spine straight, eyes sweeping each doorway. She wasn't nervous. She was assessing. New territory. New rules. At the end of the hall, a door opened. Eric Drexler stood inside, arms folded. He nodded once. "Glad you came." "You knew I would." "I hoped. There's a difference." Inside, 3 people waited. Artur, of course, seated in the corner with a mug of steaming black tea. Captain Bergman stood by a whiteboard filled with satellite images and unit designations. And then there was Lockwood. He sat alone at a table, hands flat, looking older than she remembered. His eyes met hers, steady. Anya. She didn't respond immediately. She studied him, and he let her. Finally, she said, "You set me up to take the fall. You built a trap, knowing I'd never question the shot." "I did," he said, "and I've regretted it every day since. Maxwell made it a choice between burning you or losing everything I'd built. I chose wrong. People died. I know." A long pause. No one else spoke. "I'm not here to forgive you," she said finally. "But if you're going to help us stop people like Maxwell from doing it again, I'll use what you know." His eyes lowered, but he nodded. "Fair." Drexler took over, clicking the projector. This is Operation Nebelhand, a rogue procurement network operating under the radar of 4 NATO countries. They're moving next-gen weapons into hands we cannot track. The map displayed transit lines across the Balkans and deep into Central Asia. We believe the core leadership includes 3 ex-intelligence officers, 2 private military CEOs, and a former deputy minister from a failed state. They're ghosts, like all of you. We need people who think like them, move like them, outmaneuver them. Bergman stepped forward. "We'll split into small detachments, dual sniper teams, deep recon, digital overwatch. No front lines, no base security. We operate from the shadows. Hit them where they don't expect it." Drexler looked at Anya. "You'll lead Alpha Team." She didn't hesitate. "Who's with me?" "Fitzgerald, Bergman, and a new recruit from Estonia. Intel says he's promising. You'll assess." Anya nodded. "Then let's start. But understand this. I don't follow missions designed for photo ops. If the intel's bad, if the politics interfere, I walk." Drexler smiled faintly. "That's why we chose you." Later that night, Anya stood on the helipad, watching the fog drift in from the sea. Artur joined her, his coat billowing slightly in the wind. "Feels different," he said. "It is," she replied. "Before, we were just surviving. Now we're hunting." He smiled. "That suits you better." She didn't smile back, but her eyes were alive again. "We're going to burn them down, Artur, all of them." And somewhere in the dark, the next war waited. She was ready. The first mission came fast. No ceremony, no speeches, just a briefing, coordinates, and a black case containing encrypted satcoms and false passports. Operation Naval Hand had its first confirmed node, a logistics front in northern Albania, masked as a construction firm. Satellite imagery showed a high volume of unregistered cargo moving between the site and a former Soviet airstrip. Anja's team, Alpha, was to infiltrate, verify the cargo, and identify the shipment handlers. No engagement unless compromised. But everyone knew how these things usually ended. Their insertion point was remote. The helicopter dropped them in total darkness onto a plateau above the valley. Snow covered the ground, but the temperature was rising. Mud would follow. Anja led the way, Barrett slung across her back, her body moving like it had never left the field. Fitzgerald was her shadow, every step a quiet echo. Bergman took point on comms. The Estonian, Jakob Lahn, was a quiet, wiry man with sharp eyes and quicker hands. He said little, but nothing escaped his attention. They reached the overlook by Oro 300. The construction site buzzed beneath them. Trucks, guards, heat signatures moving in pairs. The building's outer shell was hollow, a facade. Inside, crates marked as civilian hardware, but too uniform, too clean. Anya scoped in. Thermal optics confirmed it. Metallic cores, heat-sealed containers, and chemical shielding, she whispered. Bergman looked up. "You sure?" "Positive. That's not conventional arms. That's prototype-level material. Could be destabilizers, drone-borne agents, or worse." Fitzgerald muttered, "We're looking at weapons that aren't supposed to exist, or are being built off stolen research," Jacob added. Anja keyed the SATCOM. "Control, this is Alpha. Confirm visual on illegal ordnance. Recommend interception. Site is hot. High-level threat. Awaiting instructions." Minutes passed. Then Drexler's voice came through. "Hold position. We're working diplomatic channels. We may need this op to remain deniable." Anja's expression hardened. Bergman spoke low. "They're hesitating." "I won't," she replied. Through her scope, a black SUV rolled onto the site. Out stepped a tall man in a dark coat, flanked by 2 bodyguards. He greeted the site manager with a handshake and pulled out a tablet. The guards scanned the perimeter. Jacob exhaled sharply. "That's General Raid Markovic, Serbian paramilitary intelligence. Thought he was dead." "Looks alive to me," Fitzgerald said. Markovic had been implicated in multiple massacres during the Balkan Wars, then disappeared into the world of private arms trafficking. His presence changed everything. Anya keyed the comm again. "Control, confirm identity of Markovic at Grid Alpha 7. Do we have green light for soft elimination?" Silence. Then, "Negative. Stand down. Repeat. Stand down." Anya looked to Fitzgerald. "They're protecting him." "He knows too much. He's part of something bigger." Bergmanson shook his head. "If we let him go, this cargo moves within hours. Once it's out, it vanishes." The team waited, watched, and then, as Markovic turned toward the SUV, Anya made her decision. "Target acquired, adjusting for wind, 1,206 meters." "Keller, Westermann's voice came suddenly. "Abort! This is a direct order." But she had already fired. The round struck Markovich just as he opened the car door. He crumpled to the ground, blood splashing across the snow. Alarms rang out below. Guards scrambled. The site descended into panic. "Keller, what have you done?" Westermann's voice echoed with anger. "Ended the trade," she answered coldly. The line went dead. Fitzgerald grunted. "Well, that answers the question of deniability." Bergman smirked. "Guess we're in it now." Anya stood, rifle slung, eyes never leaving the chaos below. "This is what we're here for," she said. "They don't get to hide behind politics anymore." She turned toward the trees. "Let's disappear before the cleanup crew arrives." And like shadows, they vanished into the dark. They crossed the border on foot that night, cutting through fog-drenched forest and frozen stream beds. No extraction. No backup. Their mission was now unsanctioned, classified as a ghost operation, deniable by design. But Anja Keller no longer cared about permissions. By dawn, they reached an abandoned farm in northern Montenegro, a safe house. Jakob handled the drone scrambler, Bergman rechecked their perimeter, and Fitzgerald, ever the quiet sentinel, boiled water for tea as if they were on a hunting trip instead of the run. Anya reviewed the satellite feeds on her encrypted tablet. The operations site in Albania was in flames. NATO had issued a joint statement denying knowledge of any engagement, and General Rod Markovich's death was being framed as an internal power struggle. Control had gone silent. No reprimand, no recall, just the void. She sat alone for a moment, letting the fire warm her face. The envelope from Drexler, once crisp, now worn from travel, rested beside her. She opened it again. Inside was a letter, handwritten. "Keller, we built this unit not to follow rules, but to protect people from those who write them to suit themselves. If you've made it this far, then you already know what kind of war this is. No flags, no safe houses, just truth, buried beneath profit and silence. If you're ready to lead, lead. Drexler." She folded the letter and looked up at her team. Fitzgerald caught her eye. "We burned the bridge, can't go back." "We don't need to," Anya said. Jacob walked in from outside. "I tapped into an open channel intercept. Someone's looking for us. Not NATO, not local forces either." Bergman raised an eyebrow. "Contractors?" "Something worse. Ex-Intel, Russian-accented German. They're calling her Schatten." Anya didn't flinch. "Let them." Fitzgerald sipped his tea. "So, what's next, Schatten?" She stood, adjusting the pack on her shoulder. She felt the exertion from the long climb, but her eyes were clear. "Next," she said, "we begin our work before they expect us." Bergman leaned forward. "Objectives?" Anya tapped the map. 3 locations, one in Georgia, one in Morocco, one in northern Finland, all linked to the Nebelhand network. We will begin operations at all 3 in 12 days. We depart tonight. Fitzgerald smiled. "That's ambitious." "No," she replied. "It's our purpose." Outside, the fog began to lift, revealing snow-dusted hills and an open sky. A quiet, fleeting peace. But in the distance, the next task awaited. And Anja Keller, who had overcome many challenges, was ready for what was next. She was setting a new course. If you were moved by Anja's story and want to follow her next mission, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Would you trust a sniper to protect your truth? What would you have done in her place? We want to hear from you. Until next time, stay sharp, stay aware, and remember, shadows always return to the light.